On Saturday, LBC sat a reform-supporting commentator down and asked a simple question. Is the establishment out to get Nigel Farage? And in the course of answering it, she built a definition of the establishment so precise, so lovingly hand-tooled, that it excludes exactly one man in Britain. A privately educated, multi-millionaire ex-city trader who spent 2 decades in the European Parliament and has just banked £5 million gift. I bet you wonder who that is. Better than that, by the end of the segment, she concedes the very thing that she came on to deny, in 11 words on live TV. So yes, I am going to show you that exact moment, but 30 seconds of context first. Quick recap, in case you're just joining the saga, Farage was under parliamentary standards investigation for allegedly failing to register a £5 million gift, so he's resigned his seat, which conveniently pauses the investigation. And it triggered a by-election in Clacton. To his words, let voters be the judge. So yes, he is standing in his own by-election. Saturday's LBC panel included Ellie Hodges, a commentator and one of Reform's keener defenders, and Jovan, a Labour campaigner who actually ran against Farage in Clacton in 2024. Here's Ellie's opening position.
I think it's important to actually define what we mean by establishment, because I've seen all over my social media, when I say I think the establishment is out to get Nigel Farage, a lot of people reply and say, but Nigel Farage is the establishment. Whereas I don't think he is, because I think that the establishment is not simply people who are just wealthy or even influential. It's people who are part of the network of existing institutions and have an interest, I think, in maintaining the status quo of what the political agenda is saying. And Nigel Farage has spent his whole entire political career fighting against the establishment. So I think people who are saying that he is part of the establishment are completely incorrect, because he's absolutely not.
So there's the definition. To qualify as establishment, you apparently need to be part of the network of existing institutions with an interest in mainstreaming the status quo. Okay, fine. Let's run with that CV. Dulwich College, 20 years trading commodities in the city, 21 years in the European Parliament, £5 million from a single backer. This is the man who's been drawing income from existing institutions since Thatcher was in number 10, including an MEP pension from the one institution he built his entire career on hating. He despised Brussels so much that he stayed 21 years and kept the pension. If Nigel Farage knocks on your door, the network of existing institutions is standing on your doorstep asking to come in. And even the host wasn't buying the full version. And bear in mind, this is a host who opened the programme by saying he personally thinks the establishment is out to get Farage. Watch what the friendliest voice in the room has to concede.
But aren't there different types of establishment? So on one level, in terms of his personal background, you could say he's part of a kind of middle class, upper middle class establishment because he went to a private school and he made a lot of money in the city, etc. But he's not part of the political establishment, is he? Because he's been fighting for causes that have been fringe often to begin with, and he's brought them into the mainstream over it.
Private school, made a lot of money in the city. That's the case for the defence, offered by the defence, which left Jovan, the man who stood on actual Clacton doorsteps against actual Nigel Farage, to finish the job.
I mean, but at the same time, he's somebody who's sat in the European Parliament for about 20 years.
So it was fighting against it, though.
Yes, but he was returned time and time again. He has sat in the European Parliament for a significant period of time. He's had close approximations to power. Again, not just him, but you look at some of the members of Reform UK. We've got a former Home Secretary, a former Immigration Minister. The idea that even by association he couldn't be part of a political establishment, I think is kind of ridiculous.
20 years inside the Parliament, he was supposedly storming from the outside, returned election after election by the very system that was meant to have locked him out. And sitting alongside him at Reform, Jovan points out, a former Home Secretary and former Immigration Minister. The anti-establishment insurgency currently has more ex-cabinet mileage than some cabinets. Now, we should probably be a little bit fair to Ellie here. Partly because fairness matters, and partly because it makes what's coming so much worse. She does land one legitimate point. Everyone's talking as if Farage is already guilty, and we don't know that, which is correct. I mean, spoiler, I should imagine he probably is, but we don't know that. The investigation is paused, nothing is proven, and due process is real. Hold that thought for about 15 seconds of broadcast time.
Do you think he wants the investigation to conclude, though, Ellie?
Probably not. Of course not.
Why not?
Because he probably doesn't want the answer to be negative. Of course he doesn't.
And if the answer is negative...
And any person would be like that. Any politician from any party.
So the man who resigned his seat specifically, he says, so that voters can judge his actions, don't want the process that would produce an actual judgment. Well, of course not, says his defender, which is teed up the host's killer follow-up. All right, but if the verdict went against him, would he accept it? Or would the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner turn out to be the establishment too?
But if the answer was negative, do you think he would accept it? Do you think he'd take it on the chin? Or do you think he would accuse, for example, the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner who was investigating, now paused because of the by-election, do you think he'd accuse him of also being part of the establishment?
I think he probably would, but there could be some truth to that.
I think he probably would, but there's some truth to that. 11 words, and the entire worldview falls out of them. She's conceding on LBC that Farage would dismiss an independent regulator's verdict as an establishment plot and endorsing him for it in advance. The verdict doesn't exist yet. The investigation is literally suspended. The track for ignoring it has already been laid. Now, I keep watching this stuff so that you don't have to. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do, and the memberships are there as well if you want to support the channel. Now, her supporting evidence for the plot, Kevin Hollinrake, is a Conservative Party Shadow Chancellor.
I mean, we've seen Kevin Hollinrake is now actually under investigation for trying to influence the Commissioner's opinions and try and lobby him in some ways to have certain beliefs towards Nigel Farage.
Now, the investigation is real, opened on the 11th of June over alleged lobbying of the Commissioner. Alleged. An inquiry doesn't mean that any rules were broken, which is, funnily enough, precisely the courtesy she demands for Farage and extends it to no one else in this story. But look at what her best evidence actually is. Her proof of coordinated establishment is a political class failing to coordinate. One Tory alleging freelancing against the leader of a rival party that's eating his vote. Hollinrake is the man who referred Farage to the Commissioner in the first place. If these people could organise a conspiracy, they'll organise a government. And I think we've all seen the evidence on that. And then, right at the death, the whole machine reveals itself in one exchange.
Nigel Farage, I think he's ridiculous.
Would you work with the Conservatives to be anti-Nigel Farage, to stop reform getting in? Would you work with the Conservatives?
I would work personally with anybody to stop Nigel Farage.
Yeah, see, this is exactly what I'm talking about.
But that doesn't mean...
See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. A man who stood against Farage at the ballot box would like to beat him, and that, apparently, is the proof. This is the engine of the entire argument, and once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. When newspapers scrutinise him, they're the establishment. When the Sunday Times run an investigation, the Sunday Times becomes the establishment. She says so in this very segment. When rival parties oppose him, they're the uni party. When a regulator opens a file, it's a hit job. And when his old opponent says he would work with anybody to stop him, well, exactly what she's talking about. Every possible event feeds the theory. Nothing on earth can test it. Presumably, if the Commissioner cleared him tomorrow, that would just be the establishment covering its tracks. And that's what the Saturday segment actually taught us. Reform's anti-establishment brand only survives if establishment means whatever Nigel Farage currently isn't. A definition redrawn live, as often as the facts require. Because if the world means anything at all, it describes people with money, connections and institutional power who'd rather you didn't look too closely at how they use all three. On Saturday, on LBC, his defenders stared directly at that description and swore blind it didn't ring any bells. Nominations close on Friday. If Farage wins in August, the investigation into his $5 million resumes, at which point, I guess we'd all discover the Commissioner was the establishment all along. And if you want to know where that $5 million sits in the much bigger picture, 4 people in Farage's orbit gone to prison over the years across 3 different parties, and the money trail behind the current scandal runs through an $8.5 million property and a donor listed as retired stylist whose numbers just don't seem to add up. The full story is in the video that's on screen now. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button, and I'll see you next time.